Good afternoon, family. Great to be here today on our day of our Thanksgiving dinner. So, about Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving is a great day. It represents something important, a time of giving thanks. But in our society, unfortunately, the day is one day and it kind of gets drowned out. You could say even that it's surrounded by a season of discontentment, right? Because right after Thanksgiving, what do we have? We have Black Friday. And Black Friday is the first official day of the Christmas season. It's when all the sales are, when everybody's running around trying to find the best deals for all the stuff that they want to accumulate. It's a total wallowing in materialism. It's crazy. Season of discontentment. And the season of discontentment doesn't just start after Thanksgiving, because that season creeps earlier and earlier, so it ends up being before Thanksgiving. And so there are early Black Friday sales. And of course, your mailbox gets fuller and fuller as November approaches of all the ads to get you ready for Black Friday. And so the whole season is there, and Thanksgiving kind of drowns out as this one little day that we're supposed to give thanks and then quickly go on and buy stuff, kind of like a race car stopping as, as quickly as it can for the pit stop and the 15-second tire change, and then it races off its merry way again. So discontentment, right? That's the opposite of gratitude, the opposite of thanksgiving. And something that fuels discontentment is awareness, right? We open the mailbox and we read an ad and we learn that our television is not big enough. Or we see a pop-up when we're browsing something and we learn that our car is not nice enough and that it's too old and that we should get another car, right? Or we go along and we see a billboard and we realize that our phone is too old and doesn't have enough cameras on it, right? And it keeps going because we're made aware of all of these needs that we didn't know that we had before we saw those ads. And that's driven by marketing. And marketing nowadays is just too good. In fact, there's a whole science, you could say there's a science of discontentment that fuels the season of discontentment. There are people who go to school to do nothing other than figure out how to sell you more stuff more efficiently, right? There are people who study marketing and how to do an A-B analysis in a focus group, this ad versus this ad, which one is the most effective way, what's the best approach to create a desire to buy things, or in the more analytical field, data science, right? If you go onto Amazon to buy a box of vitamins or something like that, well, you might like this, or you might like this other thing, right? Data scientists have observed all of your browsing and all your purchases, and before you check out, well, you might like this other thing, this other need that you maybe weren't thinking of when you went on there, right? So the data science, that's another field that, among other things, it's to figure out how to sell you more stuff by planting the idea of that need in your head and making you a little more discontent because you realized that you didn't have something. And it's not just marketers. We can't blame everything on them. You know, we all have our peers. When we drive home from work, we go past the Joneses' house and see their cars and their house and the stuff that they have. Or we browse around and see what our friends are doing on social media, and we see their carefully curated pictures that always shows them at their best, and we're not always at our best. And so discontentment can be there, can build up in us. But we know that the opposite, contentment, is a key to happiness. You've probably all read articles and seen studies about how people who are content and thankful are actually happier than people who are discontent, even if they don't have as much stuff. So how can we be content in this kind of world, in this age of discontentment? Well, for one thing, we need to realize what a never-ending treadmill discontentment can be. It's an appetite, and unlike some appetites, when we feed the appetite, it just keeps growing. The treadmill starts going faster and faster. People used to fix things when they broke, right? Rather than just going out and buying new stuff. That's not how it works anymore. With discontentment, it's not just about what we don't have, it's about the awareness of all the things that we need. But getting more stuff doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't reduce the appetite, because the marketers and even our adversary is there to create that discontentment. Not that all discontentment is bad, right? We are probably discontent with our state of sin. If we're trying to overcome something, we might be discontent with injustice or with the status quo of something that just isn't right. But that's not really what we're talking about here today. Romans 6:16 says that we're slaves to the one that we obey. And we can be slaves to discontentment, just like we can be slaves to some sin or to some addiction. So we can end up being slaves to debt if we respond to too many of those unmet needs that we discover. Or we can end up being slaves to a car payment that we don't need. Or even if we don't have that, we can just be slaves to this consumer mindset that the adversary uses to distract us from what's really important. To eliminate discontentment, one thing we can do is we can replace it with something else. To replace it with something else. If I have something that's number one in my life and I want to dethrone it so it's not number one, I need to make something else number one in my life, because nature abhors a vacuum. Something has to take that first spot. Matthew 6:33 says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness." So that's what we make number one. And it says, all these things will be added to you. So all these things, those are all the things that we need, that we can be content with. Right? What that means is we have a God who has our back. And we have a God who has a plan for us. And we can make him number one and know that we'll have everything we need to be happy and to be content with. So it's not that stuff is bad, right? We can have stuff. But the problem with stuff is stuff wants to be number one. And as Christians, we know what should be number one, or more precisely, we know who should be number one. So 1 Timothy 6, let's turn there. 1 Timothy 6, and starting in verse 6. True godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. There's something special about that, about the state of satisfaction that's as good as being wealthy. Because people associate being wealthy with being happy, but really there are ways to be truly happy. Because happiness is really about who rather than about what. Happiness is about who. Just like with love, they say you can increase your love by giving it away. You can say that with life also in some ways. Life is better when you give it away, when you give away parts of it, like with your time. And everybody who's parents understands that. Parents make all sorts of sacrifices for their kids that they didn't have to make, but most parents would say, yeah, I do that willingly. I want to raise the next generation of godly offspring. I want to help them, and I love them so much that I want to make that sacrifice. And so they give away part of their life to do that. And it actually makes them happier doing that than had they not given that away, that part of their life. So we give away our time, we give away part of our lives, and it shows who or what is number one in our lives. Just like if we take money and we say, I'm going to, whether we're tithing or offering, we're saying, I'm going to take this and I'm going to designate it for this purpose. We show what is number one in our lives when it comes to money. We're telling the marketers, we're telling our adversary, you're not number one. This other thing over here is number one. Down in verse 8, Paul says, and having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. Jumping up to verse 7, for we brought nothing into the world, and it's certain that we can carry nothing out. So we came into the world, we were a baby, we had nothing, and yet we were happy because we had relationships. We had people immediately who loved us, and we understood that. And when we go out, when we're on our deathbed, we're about to have nothing then, and all the things that we do have isn't going to matter because the happiness wasn't related to stuff. This verse about taking nothing out, there's a song that I think of always when I read this verse by Don Henley. And he has this line in it. It says, there ain't no hearses with luggage racks. So in other words, no matter how much stuff you have, it doesn't matter because you can't take it with you. You can take your character with you. You can prepare for what comes after. But otherwise, everything is gone. Although you can leave an impact here. When you think of the one who wrote 1 Timothy, that was Paul. And Paul had a lot of stuff and he had a great position, which he then gave up when God called him and he became a Christian. He gave up all his stuff and his position and he exchanged it for being whipped and scourged and stoned and all that stuff. And then he died and he carried no physical things with him. And yet he very much impacted all of us, right? When we read the Bible, so many books come from him. He even impacted the whole Roman Empire, right? The spread of Christianity that was a thorn in their side. He had a major impact on history. Now, he didn't have a month named after him like Julius Caesar or Augustus Caesar, but really for all he did for his impact, he should get a month. We should have the month of Paul right now. Yep. So we need to be content, and it is a key to happiness. There was someone, and I was trying to find the person who had the car whose license plate said grateful. And I thought I knew who it was, but I was wrong. But that person, whoever they are, deserves a shout out because they got this one down. But we want to stay focused on what's important, and being content is what can do that. Keeping our number one. Then we can say, I'm not going to be consumed with what I don't have. John 10:10 is words of Christ. John 10:10, where he's talking about the shepherd and the thief. He says, the thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. So he's saying two things, two sentences, and they seem like they're disconnected sentences. The first part says that God wants us to have abundance. He wants us to have stuff, as long as the stuff doesn't have us. And sometimes stuff wants to have us. But if that doesn't happen, then God is fine with us having stuff. But then the first part of the verse, the thief doesn't come except to steal and kill and destroy. We all have to ask who or what has the most potential to steal or destroy our happiness, right? One of those thieves can be discontentment. So, brethren, Thanksgiving is a season of discontentment. Thanksgiving it's an island of contentment amidst a sea of discontentment. And likewise, we can be islands of contentment amidst a society of discontentment. And though we live in that age of discontentment, God has given us a vision of something better. So let's treasure that vision as we pause this week for Thanksgiving.